people would think, okay, if she slips, she falls down and she dies. And I don't want to die, I like my life. So this element, it's like a language. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about aerial acrobatics and risk. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, but I've also noticed that, for example, when I put some content on Instagram, so often when I'm saying, oh, the chain is so dangerous, then everyone wants to watch it. It's stupid. But it seems that there is this element of danger is something people are fascinated by it. And it's crazy, because like it's not cool. Like the worst thing which could happen when I'm doing the aerial act is falling down and dying. And I don't want to die. I like my life. But so then why am I doing this? And why am I doing this high and sometimes without a crash mat? I'm going to try to explain how I see this element of risk in circus act and how we protect ourselves as aerialists, how we constantly try to keep the risk as low as possible, and what considerations go into doing an aerial act, for example, like my aerial chain act. Circus is the poesy of risk. So risk or perceived risk, like for example the height, oh shit, if she lets go, if she slips, she will die. This element, it's like a language. It shows the difficulty of the trick much better than doing just a very difficult trick where only aerialists understand that it's difficult. So the risk or the perceived risk is first of all like a language and a very important element of the dramatic part of a circus act. I'm saying perceived risk because we want no real risk. Like really we want to keep our risk below 0.1%, because if you would play one act 1,000 times, and this happens in a circus career, that you play the same act 1,000 times, and then if you fail one time, you cannot fail one time. So you want to really keep the risk zero. This is why I like to say perceived risk or perceived danger, because yes, it's a dramatic element. Yes, sometimes it can maintain tension, but it's so important to understand that we do not want to put us into real danger. Of course not. You just want to make the people feel danger. And this can be, for example, by being very high up and hanging from the chain without something below. So then people would think, okay, if she slips, she falls down and she dies. Well, guess what? If you have a silks, which goes all the way to the floor, and you're hanging up there and you let go of your hands, you also fall down. The risk is not bigger like this. It just looks more risky. The thing of protection, of whether you use a crash mat, whether you do not use a crash mat, whether you use a belt where you're rigged to the element, or whether you use a net. So different aerial disciplines use different ways of protection. For example, flying trapeze uses a net, because that's the only way if someone falls down, and this can happen in flying trapeze, then you want to fall on the net. And also it can be a really nice part of the act, because it bounces like a trampoline, so it looks really cool actually, but it's also very difficult to set up. So it's not suitable for all aerial acts. Second most typical thing of protection which I used a lot is a crash mat. You use it also when you're training things. When you're training things in the studio, it's usually very low. When you perform in a circus, then it can be higher. You would probably still not want to fall from the top to the crash mat. I have exactly one trick where I need the crash mat, because I could potentially miss the trick and fall down. And this trick, I am very aware that I'm not too high and that I have the mat placed right below the rope in this case. Now the crash mat doesn't work if I start swinging around. If you want to really fill up the space and you have a performer flying winch, then you swing around in a big circle, and then if you only have one small crash mat, it's not going to work. So then you need another device of protection if you choose to use one. I have a dance trapeze act where I do not use any protection, and I always try to keep my hand in touch with the trapeze and potentially do the tricks more slowly than too fast so that I never slide. You could also use a safety belt. So you put like a belt here around your waist and you attach it to your element, for example, to the trapeze. This is very practical when you do, for example, a toe hang. So you hang from your feet. Then sometimes people use a belt for this. Or if they do swinging trapeze, that's when the trapeze swings, but it's only a solo discipline. Then you can also you always use an acrobatic belt for the acrobatic tricks. There is a difference between tricks which you can easily miss and tricks you do not miss so easily. For example, if I would do something where I completely let go of the element, yes, let's say on the rope twist, then there is a big risk of missing the rope because I might kick the rope might be far away, and then I cannot catch it, and then I fall to the ground. There are other tricks which look more dangerous sometimes because it's some large drops where you wrap yourself in the rope and then you let yourself fall down. These tricks look more dangerous, but actually they are not that dangerous because you are in a knot, like you cannot miss it. Now, in some cases, which type of protection you use, it depends about how confident you feel about the trick. Is there a probability that you would fail, or is there zero probability to fail? Zero, I mean 0, not 0.1. If there is a 0.1 probability to fail, then artists would always use a crash mat or an acrobatic belt or a net if it's a flying trapeze. If it's a trick which once you've learned it, you cannot fail, then you might choose to not use protection. Part of it is also practical reasons, because, for example, if you would be flying around, but you would be attached by a belt, then you could not do so many movements. And now, how do we decide that we cannot fail? Why do we know that we cannot fail? And of course, sadly, sometimes accidents happen. It's like car accidents also sometimes happens. I see that a trick is safe when it depends a lot on my strength. So at one day I might feel 100%, at some other day I might be at 50%, okay? But if the trick which I'm doing needs only 30% of my maximum power, of my maximum strength, then even on the bad days when I'm at 50% of my strength, I can still do it without risk. And this is like really being in contact with myself. If I would notice that I'm very tired for doing a trick, I would not do it. I would do something else, do something easier. I would change my choreography. This is also the reason why you cannot say you have to do this trick always with a crash mat or with a safety belt, because every artist is different and has like a different level of the strength they have, the experience they have, the kind of act they want to perform, the kind of experience with height they have. So it's really difficult to say, hey, that's the right way to do it. And I think that's a personal choice for artists, very much like how you drive your car. That's also something very risky, and it's a personal choice how you decide to drive your car. In which state of mind it's still okay, in which state of mind it's not okay, or physical state also. Now, something very important to know is that most fatal accidents happen because of rigging problems or rigging mistakes. This is also why when you have an aerialist at your venue, they might be a bit complicated about rigging. They might ask many questions. They might want to really understand the system. They might say, hey, I do not want to hang from that. They are like this because most bad accidents happen because of rigging failures. And it can be either failures of the hardware, carabiner, or a bad swivel. This could happen. But it can also happen about how it's attached to the venue, like which type of winch you use. Is everything okay with the winch? So this is the reason why artists are sometimes so picky about rigging. There is a reason to it. So as a resume, the risk in aerial acts, it's like the risk in life. You could die, the biggest risk, but nobody wants to die. And the things you're seeing on the stage as an audience is a lot of drama, the perceived risk. It's not that people are doing something which they think could go wrong. And then if you do some element as an artist where you think, okay, this sometimes could go wrong, then you do the measurements to make sure that you do not die when it goes wrong. For example, you put a crash mat below the flying trapeze, you put a net, and on the swinging trapeze or on some very difficult tricks, you can also use a belt. So this is it. It's never the risk, it's the perceived risk, and we try to keep the real risk as low as possible, ideally at 0.